With the new X series of scratch-offs from the New York Lottery, you can multiply your winnings up to 100 times. The X series from the New York Lottery. It's a better way to multiply. You must be 18 years or older to purchase. Please play responsibly. In this week's episode of Bills Pod Squad, we've got a roundtable featuring Eric Woods, Steve Tasker, and Chris Brown. The guys help me look ahead to free agency and discuss their top 3 needs and 1 want for the Bills. They also share stories of some of their favorite free agents to come to Buffalo. And we play a fun game of Who's in Your Phone. The guys name their most famous contact in their phone. You don't want to miss this week's episode of Bills Pod Squad starting right now. Welcome into this week's episode of Bills Pod Squad presented by the New York Lottery. Maddy Glab here is your host with a wonderful crew for a roundtable episode today. I'm joined by Eric Woods, Steve Tasker, and Chris Brown, who can all be heard on One Bills Live and seen on Buffalo Bills social media and the website. Guys, we have hit the dog days of the offseason. There's been a lot of news, and at the same time, not so much for the Bills, which could be a good thing, but it also could be a bad thing. J.J. Watt is headed to Arizona. For some of the Bills fans and Bills Mafia, maybe a little bit upsetting that he won't be headed to Buffalo. A bunch of other things. Matt Stafford and Jared Goff switch places. Deshaun Watson wants out. Russell Wilson was giving names of teams that he would be traded to, but he doesn't want to leave right now. It's been interesting, but happy month of March, guys. We are less than 3 weeks away from free agency. Let me get some first takes on the table that has been set according to what's happened in the previous month. What do you guys think about this J.J. Watt move to the Arizona Cardinals?
Well, I guess I'll start. We were surprised that Arizona had not been on the radar, and of course everybody was having a lot of fun trying to decipher and read the tea leaves about who J.J. Watt was going to go to, and leaving clues and trying to figure out every tweet about what cryptic clue was inside. Nobody had Arizona. Yeah, nobody had Arizona Cardinals on their radar. But I think the number that he signed for tells you all you need to know. I think the Bills were in it till the end. And I think from the sound of it, the Bills were in it to the end, and the only thing that kept them from getting it was the fact that Arizona jumped up and gave him a big number. I don't think the Bills were going to give him that kind of number. I think the Bills were going to give him a smaller number with some incentives that were probably easy to reach, other incentives that would have depended on team success and his participation in that would have given him a chance to hit a home run maybe financially if the team won the Super Bowl or got to the AFC Championship game again, that kind of thing. But for a team to jump up and give him $15.5 million and guarantee him $23 million over the course of the 2 years of the deal, JJ can't say no to that. There's no hard feelings anybody in Buffalo Bills country should have against JJ Watt. A guaranteed $23 million. Hey, tip your hat to the guy. Good for you, JJ. Hope you play well in the NFC West.
And the thing about it that concerned me was once ESPN's Diana Rossini last week, she tweeted out, hey, J.J. Watt's getting contract offers in the range of $15 to $16 million a year. As soon as I saw that number, I was thinking to myself, well, if some team's going to lay out that kind of cash, the Bills are going to be out because they're not going to get into a bidding war. Under Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, they have been a fiscally responsible team in free agency. They don't overpay as a rule, and I think they would view that number as overpaying, even for a player the caliber of J.J. Watt, but at 32 years old, I think that they see that as overpaying, and that's why I thought if the money got to that level, which as we found out it did, that the Bills were going to be out on that.
Yeah, Eric, were you surprised at all?
Yeah, I was. And I was excited about the possibility of the Bills getting J.J. Watt. But to Chris and Steve's point, when you give a guy that much money, you have to ensure that he's going to come in and be a difference maker. This is a guy that's been hurt a bunch lately. He's 32 years old. There's no guarantee that he's going to come in and wreck the AFC East and be what the Bills need from a pass rush standpoint. And we'll get to this later. But to me, like you guys mentioned, you can't give him that multi-year deal knowing that you've got to pay Josh Allen. You know, the Bills are in a unique spot this year. They have their quarterback in the last year of his rookie deal. Well, yes, you could have given him the 1-year deal, but when Arizona gave him the 2 years at 15.5, that's the difference maker.
Yeah, we still don't know what that salary cap number is officially going to be. It could be 180, 181. I mean, what teams were expecting it to be before COVID has completely wrecked a lot of teams and what they thought they could maybe get this off season and what they have to plan for in the future. So that has had a big part in all of this as we're talking about teams that can afford some higher profile players in free agency this year or not. But on today's episode, we're going to have a little fun for our first segment. Then we're going to get into the free agency talk. We've got a unique perspective from Steve and Eric, of course, who are former players and know what it's like to welcome in new guys, say goodbye to new guys, and also play for different teams, get re-signed, all of that good stuff. But first, let's do a segment of who's in your phone. All right, who is the most famous person in your phone, and what is an interesting story to go along with that person? To kick us off, Eric, who's in your phone? Who's the most famous contact that you've got?
Yeah, famous is kind of all relative. And to me, like, there's probably more famous football guys in my phone, a Jim Kelly even, someone like that. But when I think of famous and how I see people, Kenny Chesney is probably it for me. Big time country music star. Connected with him my rookie year in the NFL. Actually went to 3 concerts in a week. One was in Louisville, one was in Buffalo, and then drove down to Pittsburgh. We connected then. Last year, Super Bowl weekend, we re-exchanged numbers. He had got a new number since then. And I tried not to hit him up. There was a couple long nights during the early stages of the quarantine where we were playing some music and we'd FaceTime him. And I figured at some point he's going to block me if we keep this up. But he's always treated me extremely well. And I'll give him the nod for the most famous of my phone.
Wow, Kenny Chesney. That's
a
good
fine
place
line
to start.
That's a fine line you walk, though, when you're dealing with pretty big, headline people on your phone. It's like, well, what's crossing the line here?
Right.
That is tricky.
And then there was kind of a lull in the communication for a while. And then I did a spot on NFL Network during the playoffs, and he hit me up and said, "Hey, I'm sitting down in the Keys, and look who I see up on the TV at the bar."
That's
or
good.
Whatever. And
That's
so I
nice.
was like, all right.
Yeah, you're good.
He reopened it, though. Now I just got to be careful that I don't do the FaceTime again.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's good.
Next time you FaceTime him, you're singing some Kenny Chesney songs, asking how your voice sounds compared to him.
Right. Yeah, that'll go great.
Right.
All right. Next up, Brownie, it's your turn. Can
Oh,
you top
God,
that?
you're going to make me go next after Kenny Chesney. Okay, so I am not going to pretend for a second to have a phone bank like these two guys with all their professional football connections, which run far deeper from a player perspective than mine do. So the best that I can do is Summer Sanders, the Olympic gold medalist, who is in my phone, who, as we know, is a Bills fan because her husband is a Buffalo native. He's from Hamburg. Eric Schlope's his name. He was on the U.S. ski team, so there's an Olympic connection between them. But my connection with her actually goes back further than most people might realize, because when I was an intern at WFAN Radio in New York as a college student, I was a summer intern, and they would have all kinds of famous athletes rolling through there for in-studio interviews and all of that stuff. So sure enough, she's about a year removed from winning the gold medal in swimming in the 92 Olympics in Barcelona, and she comes in because she was in town doing some promo stuff. She wasn't even doing the NBA, shows yet that, she's probably most known for. So she gets in there, and I'm dating a girl who would become my wife in college, and she was a college swimmer and loved Summer Sanders. So I'm like, oh, man, I got to do something here. So she finishes the interview. She comes out of the studio, and I just say, hey, look, my girlfriend's a college swimmer, huge fan of yours, and she couldn't have been nicer. She was great. Signed, an autograph. I don't know what I came up with. It was probably a scrap of paper or something, but she signed her autograph on it. And my girlfriend, who is now my wife, was like over the moon about it. So it was totally worth it. So fast forward like 20-something years later, and we're having a preseason employee party where we all kind of get together, and it's like, just like a backyard kind of deal. And there are some people that aren't employees that are there as well. And sure enough, Summer and her husband, Eric, are there. And I'm there with my wife, who is now completely freaking out. So she's like, "Oh, you got to introduce me." I'm like, "I don't know her personally either, and she's not going to remember me from 20 years ago with all the people that she's met." But again, summer was great. Couldn't have been nicer. And my wife talked to her and bent her ear for about a half an hour. And so now I have her phone number, but I don't think I've given it to my wife because I don't trust her in terms of doing the same thing that Eric was fearing in terms of, stepping over the line with somebody like that. So that's my story. But, yes, it's probably Summer Sanders. I figure an Olympic gold medalist is probably pretty good.
That's a pretty good contact. And with family and friends who know, the career that we work in and know we probably have some contacts of whether it's current or former players or people that are associated with the Bills or someone like Summer Sanders, you never want to give a contact away because you're not sure what that person would do with that contact. I trust your wife, so I think she'll be all good with it. But never want to give a contact away to somebody.
Well, it's different with your friends because your greatest fear is when they abuse that number or make use of it, and then that person asks, "Well, how'd you get my number?" And then they drop your name. Then you are completely hosed at that point.
Yeah, lessons for everyone who's listening in. Don't share important contacts or else your butt could be on the line. All right, Tasker, your turn.
He's scrolling through right now
Round us
as
out.
you're asking him.
All my famous contacts are football related.
Which you probably have like 100. You and Eric probably could combine
I got a ton.
for a whole
Right.
But from the broadcast world, when he was with CBS from the broadcast world,
he's got some names in there.
Big time guys, numbers, especially doing sidelines. I know that you're reaching out to people throughout the week and getting guys on the phone. So that's probably a little.
I think he's having a hard time choosing because he's
I've
scrolling
got
through these right now.
Because
This is like
I do
embarrassing.
have, I've got the usual suspects like Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott and those kind. I got Frank Reich in my phone and Jim and all the Hall of Famers from the Bills like Lofton and Thurman and Jim and Bruce and all that. Those guys are on text loop. So they're not famous. So I'd probably say
you're the only person who doesn't think they're famous.
You know who I think that most people get a kick out of is Chris Boomer from ESPN. I've got him in my phone. Everybody else is like, old players. I got Peter King, the Football Morning in America in my phone.
He's got all the big CBS producers and
I got more people behind the scenes, like all the PR guys, like Mark Dalton and those guys, like the Arizona PR guy, and I've got Phil Simms in my phone, CBS cohort, and there are a lot of guys I took out. I've got friends of mine. I've got a couple of them in there that passed away, that I still kept.
Ooh.
Right,
might be time to refresh the phone number list.
So
wait, that took a dark turn. I wasn't expecting that, Steve.
I don't clean my phone out.
I was just getting ready to say, quit bragging on your contact list. Let's move on, Steve. But then you went that direction. And now
right. You never know. What I do is, you just kind of, I wonder if I have his number, and you kind of thumb through and see if you do. So I know this too. I've cleaned a lot of them out over the years. I got Wally Zerbiak in my phone.
Oh, Wally! He's a Long Island guy.
Yeah,
big
I see
basketball player.
I might see him this spring. We're golfers, so
awesome.
Pride
guys
of Miami,
like that.
Ohio.
Yeah.
So
look at Eric pulling out the college. Yes, nice.
There you go. So that's it. I'll put Chris Berman, or I don't know. I'll say Peter King. I'll say the
go
right.
Peter King.
Peter King, Chris Berman. Those are two good names. What I'm getting from this is that we could do a whole episode and you could just go through your phone and tell stories about different people in your phone.
I've known that. I've known Peter
you
King.
Have a lot.
Yeah, I've known Peter King for like 30 plus years.
What about you, Maddie? What about your phone?
I was going to say we did this with Kim, one of the episodes when she was on with us, and her most famous contact was Peyton Manning, I believe. I can't remember the story that went along with it, but I was like, all right, text him, see if we can get him on the podcast. Hopefully, maybe.
Wait, you don't have Peyton Manning? Where are these Tennessee connections? Come on.
I don't. I know it's a Tennessee connection. Don't unfortunately have him in my phone, although we did run into each other when he was, in Knoxville. He was really close with my bosses. And so anytime he came into town, he would come right into our office. So it wouldn't be weird if you walked into the office and there's Peyton Manning standing there talking to my former bosses from Tennessee. But there was always a word that we would use when there was someone important in the office to get your act together. It was purple tally. And so when you heard someone yell purple tally, it was like, who's in the building now. And
don't wanna
Peyton
know.
Manning was definitely one of those people who walked in and everybody was
Purple
like,
tally. We got to come up with. Wait a minute. Okay,
what
staff
you're
alert.
doing.
Staff alert.
Stop screaming, stop
we're gonna-
yelling,
staff
stop
alert.
acting like crazy people.
We
Staff
need to
alert.
get-
We're
we-
going to
would-
come up with our own word.
Yeah.
And it can't be purple tally. I'll
Yeah,
just say that right now.
We got to help University of Tennessee
gotta-
out too. They got to
yeah.
come up with a better phrase than that.
We got to
all.
come up with our own here at in this location for our own. Put that. That's a staff alert out there. I want to.
I'm putting that on your to-do
I want
list.
a
You can work on
keyword
that.
before this podcast is over about what our new word's going to be when Eric Wood shows up on premises. So
I mean, you walk into the One Bills live studio sometimes. It's a crazy place to walk into. You never know what's going to go on. You never know what's happening. Pre-COVID days, you know, the instigators would end
Yep.
and Petey and Rivs are hanging out in the back of the studio. You guys are getting ready to go on. It's
there's a lot going
cool
on
place
sometimes.
to be.
Yeah, a lot
I
going
would
on.
have to say my most famous contact. I'll do it quick before we move on. Probably Alvin Kamara. He went to Tennessee.
Oh, nice.
Got to know him quite a bit when he was at Tennessee. Of course, he transferred from Alabama, so it was his third school, I want to say, because he started with Alabama, then went to a community college, and then came to Tennessee. So he was an awesome player to cover. So much fun, had that big personality that everybody knows him by in college. So I love seeing someone who has a personality like that in college and just watch it grow in the NFL. He is not scared to be himself and won't let anybody else tell him otherwise. He is who he is. I knew him when his dreads were like this. Now his dreads are past his shoulders. I pulled up a picture the other day of him when he was a sophomore, redshirt sophomore, or one of his first seasons with Tennessee, and he looked so young compared to how he looks now. But love getting to watch him in the NFL and love seeing what he's done since he's been in the league. He has totally been a difference maker for the Saints, and they got someone good when they drafted Alvin Kamara, because he can do more than just run the rock. He can catch it too. I just saw
him tweet real quick, Maddie. He just bought a house in Montana.
I saw that.
That's bizarre. Like, you could have given me 50 guesses and I wouldn't have guessed like an NFL player would buy a house in Montana. I mean, unless you're talking like Jared Allen or somebody like that.
Right.
Like, most guys are looking for beachfront property and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Montana.
I think his tweet said something along the lines of like, I'm breathing in Montana air. Like, stop trying to contact me. I'm living my own life out in Montana.
So he's trying to get off
now.
the grid.
So,
that's what he's trying to do.
Yeah, that's what he's trying to do. He's also involved with NASCAR. So
right.
the
Yes,
guy
I
is
knew
a
that.
unique individual, has a lot of different tastes, talents. But yeah, so Alvin would be mine. You guys definitely have some very awesome, interesting, unique people in your phone as well, from Kenny to Summer to Berman to Peter King. So that
was fun.
Nice round of who's in
stuff.
your phone, but we'll move on. You guys are on here, of course, to talk about free agency, to help me set the table for free agency, which starts March 17th. I can't believe we are already in March. It feels like we just got to take a breath, and here we are already preparing for the upcoming season and getting ready for some moves to happen. The Bills have quite a few free agents themselves, so we'll see who re-signs with the team. We'll see who comes to the Buffalo Bills from other teams, but I kind of wanted to set the stage by talking to Steve and Eric a couple questions just about being former players first. So, Steve, you started your career with the Oilers. You were there from 85 to 86, and then you moved on to the Bills, where you obviously spent the rest of your career. But what is it like just to be a player who's uncertain about what team they're going to go to next? You were claimed off of waivers heading to the Buffalo Bills. So what's it like, not knowing where you would go to next, and also being a new player on a new team? Because I think that's something that a lot of people forget about during free agency is what's going through these players' minds when they become a free agent and your future is uncertain.
Well, it's interesting because I was never a player that I was always kind of a difficult player to quantify, even now, because I covered kicks, and it was hard to really get a handle on how much I contributed, and other teams would have very widely differing opinions about how important a player like I would be. And certainly I wasn't a starter for the Buffalo Bills. So when I got a chance to be like plan B or something for the Buffalo Bills, I always thought, man, if you're a free agent, the first thing it meant for me was that I was unemployed. I didn't have a job. So it was harrowing for me. I didn't know that if I would be having to stay, getting to stay in Buffalo or being forced to leave. And anytime you have to do that, you got to know too that back then, as soon as I got picked up by the Buffalo Bills in '86, we moved here and we sunk down roots here and we started having children here. Our family was here. And to go through the mental gymnastics to get your mind around possibly uprooting all of that and moving to a brand new city was pretty stressful. I never had to leave Buffalo, but I did have a chance where there were some opportunities where I could have had I wanted to. It never happened. So it's for a certain level of player like I was, and we weren't as well versed in free agency as the guys are now because it's part of the landscape. Back then it wasn't. It was brand new. So nobody really knew how to think about it. So going forward it was a little bit better than that, but I was never so uneasy about my career as when I didn't have a job when I was a free agent. When I came from the Oilers to the Bills, it was off the waiver wire where I knew the Oilers wanted me to play for them. And through the rules of the game, they had to expose me for the waivers for 24 hours, and I didn't clear waivers. Somebody put a bid in on me. It was the Buffalo Bills. So that was different. And I didn't have a chance to feel any angst about being on a new team. In fact, I was a little bit thrilled, given the level of player that I was, that anybody even knew who I was, let alone wanted me to play for them.
Do you know if anybody else put in a claim on you besides the Bills?
There was nobody lower than the Bills. I don't know if anybody else did.
Yeah.
And they
Oilers had first crack. I was just curious if anybody else put a claim.
I do not know. I kind of doubt it. It was kind of even the Oilers were very surprised that anybody did, because it was understood that to put them over procedural waivers the way they did, that the Oilers wanted me to play for them on Sunday.
Yeah.
They didn't want anybody else to grab me. So, it was a little different scenario. But I think a lot of players now, if they're smart, they relish the opportunity to find out what they're worth. And I think it's a much better atmosphere in the league. It's much more fun for fans, and amazingly, I think it's more fun for fans everywhere to know that their team could snatch a great player from a club who would really help them on a year-to-year basis. So I think it's a much better atmosphere now. Eric, I don't know what you feel.
Yeah, Eric, you were with the Bills from 2009 to 2017. I mean, you re-signed with the Bills and you spent your whole career with them. So you necessarily didn't get a chance to test the market or to see what else would be out there. But were those some thought? Did you ever have those thoughts? Did you ever have the opportunity to possibly do that? I mean, why did you choose also to re-sign with the Bills? When you re-sign, you also could think about going elsewhere. So when you look back on your career, how did that all work out? And were you happy that you ended up staying in Buffalo your entire career and didn't necessarily get the experience that some other players get, whether it's a good experience from free agency or a not so good experience from free agency?
Yeah, I wanted to stay in Buffalo my entire career. I loved it from the second I got up there. The organization treated me so well, and I'm one of those guys where I wanted to finish what I started. If I would have left Buffalo and then they got good without me, if they would have made the playoffs without me, I would have just felt it would have been so unsettling for me knowing that they made me a first-round draft pick and put that type of investment in me, and then I'm going to go to free agency, leave, and then if they did it without me, it would have stung. It would have stung really bad, honestly. And so I would have loved to hit free agency, figure out what I was truly worth, and then come back to the Bills. The Bills just made it way too good of an offer preseason of my final year of my contract both times. Heading into year 5, the last year of my rookie deal, we started a contract negotiation, and it made it worth my while to re-sign before the season. And then the same exact thing happened my final year. I'll tell a quick story about my final year, which was leading into year 9. We had been negotiating a contract through training camp, and it finally got to the point where we're like, look, we're not going to come to an agreement on this. We have, you think I'm too old, whatever it is. It's negotiations. You're pulling out any stops. And finally, I just got offended, and that's where you kind of almost got to stay out of as a player. But I'm like, I'm just going to go through the season. I want to come back to Buffalo, but I guess I'll figure out what I'm worth. And then it really started ramping up. And then we were so close at that point towards the third preseason game. I was like, well, now I can't play in this third preseason game. I got all this money on the table. I can't play in it without a deal. So I told my agent, I said, I'll go warm up for the game and all that. But I think we were kind of talking, it's probably best to sit. Well, the Bills didn't want me to do that. We got the deal done. So I signed my second contract extension, my third contract with the Bills in the locker room in Sean McDermott's office while I was in pads. And then I go out in the game and I separate my shoulder, which I didn't miss any time for, but I separated my shoulder right before the half, go in, and you can get a shot to kind of relieve the pain, and there's not additional damage you're going to do to it. I took a shot, and McDermott's like, well, we're going to sit you for the, first series of the second half. It's dumb. And I said, no. I said, if the rest of the offensive line's going out there, I'm going out with the guys. And he's like, well, don't be stupid. I'm like, well, I already got my contract now. I don't really care anymore. I'm going to go out there and play with the guys. There's not a whole lot of risk. So I went and played in the first series of the second half with the separated shoulder. Not super smart on my end, but I didn't want to be like, well, I signed my contract extension. Now you four go out and handle business for that first series.
Yeah, those negotiations are so interesting. I mean, it all goes on behind closed doors, and fans and reporters only know so much. I mean, it becomes official or word comes out and there's reports. And it's interesting to hear that you signed yours in Sean McDermott's office in your pads about to go play a game. I'm sure there's several other interesting stories about how deals get done and what type of hours they get done at. I always remember, or I keep going back to that Stephon Diggs trade that came out at like 10:30 at night the day that it happened, which is crazy.
And just one more on the signing the contracts. The Bills put a tweet out or a picture out of me signing a contract in his office. Well, you could see my home address on the tweet. So then I'm like, Boyko, you got to get that picture down, because someone, I guess it just started like blowing up like, hey, if anyone wants to send Eric Wood something, here's his address. And so we had to get that off. Oh man.
Jeez, that's a good story. All right, Brownie, you've covered the Bills for, what is this year, 10th, 11th, 12th? What year is this going to be?
It's a lot more than that, and I'm not even saying it.
No, 20 plus.
No, it's too long. Yeah, it's been a while. We'll just say that.
Well, to that point, I mean, you've covered free agency for several years. You've seen how the market has changed. You've seen how free agency has changed overall. How do you look at free agency now versus maybe your first couple years covering the NFL? What has changed about it? What's different? How has it gotten more monstrous every year?
I think teams are more fiscally responsible on the whole now than they were in the early years of free agency, because back then there were just these bidding wars that would go on for player services, and it was intense. Like, there would be 2 or 3 teams going after somebody, and the money would just go up and up and up and up, because teams had not experienced what it was like to be in cap jail yet. And that really didn't, those chickens really didn't come home to roost for the first time for a lot of these teams until the late 90s, early 2000s, when these teams that spent lavishly or that kept kicking the can down the road with restructures finally had to pay the piper. And it served as a very hard lesson for some franchises. I mean, Bills fans still remember what's commonly known as Black Monday, when they had to cut Bruce Smith, Andre Reed, and Thurman Thomas all on the same day because they tried to keep it together for so long and pay those guys their proper due along with other players on the roster, and then it just became untenable. And teams had to make very, very difficult decisions, and it brought on this new era of an approach to free agency that was more fiscally responsible than the first wave, because they saw what the repercussions brought. And it put teams in cap jail where they just couldn't even compete. Some teams were putting 24 real NFL players on a roster with 25 guys who probably really didn't belong in the NFL, but that's what they had to do because they couldn't afford any other options, because they had so much dead cap money or cost prohibitive contracts. And so now I think more teams, you still have teams that spend lavishly, but there are more teams that are far more fiscally responsible and rely on their draft department, college scouting to really build the roster through the draft with cheaper labor, and only make maybe a couple of lavish spending moves in free agency. And then there's some teams that just don't do it at all. So that's probably how free agency, I would say, has changed the most.
Mm-hmm. And we're seeing it not necessarily a part of free agency, but it's always interesting to see these big trades that kind of happen right before free agency that just make me think the NFL is becoming more and more like the NBA with these blockbuster deals that happen to get a player to a new team, and the teams that get involved with these trades. I think it's a very interesting precursor to when free agency begins and, what could happen in the next couple weeks. But you all have experienced high-profile free agents coming to Buffalo, and you've been around some really interesting players who have come to Buffalo, higher-profile guys who have come to Buffalo for a year or two. Who has been the highest profile, and I want all you to answer this, who has been the highest profile free agent that you have played with or covered during your time with the Bills, and why? Steve, I'll start with you.
For me, you can say what you want. The ones I played with, there weren't that many when I played out in '97. I mean, we had brought James Lofton in, who ended up going to the Hall of Fame and playing for us through 4 Super Bowls. Cornelius Bennett was not a free agent; he was a draft pick. I think during my time in the broadcast industry, I don't think there's anybody that was more polarizing and more sensational than the contract they gave to Terrell Owens. I thought that was an absolute firework going off. It was unbelievable.
It was only a 1-year deal.
It's a 1-year deal. I think other than that, the biggest name and the biggest splash that gave Bills fans so much enthusiasm was probably Mario Williams when he signed for the mega contract that he did. That was out of the ordinary for the Buffalo franchise to be able to sign a big-time guy like Mario Williams was. And he played well for this franchise when he was here, too. So I think the T.O. contract and the Mario Williams signing were probably as big a free agent signings as this franchise has ever made. Wow. Despite even what happened, because there wasn't any real free agency back in the early '90s.
I will say some of those more recent ones that Steve mentioned got as big and as out of control as they did because of social media. Some of those older signings, back in the day, didn't carry as much fanfare because there wasn't this up-to-the-minute access that everybody had to what the hell was going on or what national reporters were reporting. And so, like the Mario Williams thing, that got out of control fast. Like, it wasn't only like, is he here? Oh, I saw him at a restaurant. There's all these people saying they spotted Mario here or there. And I mean, we're talking about a 6'6", 295-pound man. It's not like your average Joe walking down the street.
It's like
I saw him here, and now he's at Jim Kelly's house. Jim's hosting him, and all of this stuff. And he's giving him hunting equipment. It's like, what the hell is going on?
It was like Sasquatch. You can't, if you see him, there is no mistaking who he is. Right? If you see him, that's a Sasquatch. Look at it. And that's the way Mario Williams was. He's like 9 feet tall and 6 feet wide, and he was all of it, man. He checked every box of a superhuman athlete.
You got Lenova Pizza writing in pepperoni, come to Buffalo, Mario. You got fans out here at Abbott Road putting signs up like welcoming him already and like come to Buffalo. It was off the chain.
Right.
Like Eric remembers.
Yeah, so I played with both those free agent signings. T.O. was my rookie year. Really awesome dude. I actually just had him on my podcast. We had a great conversation. There's a picture of me with my Joe Theismann leg break, and one of the trainers and T.O. were the two guys that picked me up off the ground. And always got a soft spot for T.O. We've hung around Derby times together and stayed in contacts over the years. So we had a fun conversation. And then Mario Williams came in, and it was funny because you bring in these guys from other teams. Well, we played against Houston a few times, and it gets chippy in the box at times. Well, during the Houston game, I laid out a dude on an interception on their sideline, and Mario Williams came off the bench and hit me. And he got a $10,000 fine because he wasn't even in the game. And, there were some other fines, but he got the biggest one because he wasn't in the game. Well, 6 months later, he signs I run into him in the locker room at Buffalo, and he's like, "You look familiar." I'm like, "Yeah, I've been here a few years, And so we started talking about it. He's like, No. we had like
that was the
hardest laugh
J.J.
about it.
Watt interception return, right?
No, this was we were playing them at home early in
Oh,
my
it was
career. I
home,
want to
okay.
say, yeah, one of my first couple years in the league. So JJ wasn't in the league
Okay.
yet, but we had thrown an interception and we were really chippy throughout that game. And it was funny because the corner is following Sean Cody, their nose guard, and Sean Cody thinks like he's going to go get a block, and I just laid Sean Cody out, and so that's why it created this big deal because I didn't even hit the ball carrier. I just took that dude out. And so it was fun getting to know Mario, and Mario was a beast. I remember getting on a scale after him in the preseason. So we had to weigh in and out of every practice. And after practice one day, we weighed the exact same amount. I had sweated off like 8 pounds. He lost like 1, and we weighed the exact same. And we all started joking around like, those two dudes do not look the same. like they are built differently now.
That's
Yeah.
right.
See, now I would say in terms of free agents just covering the team, now this is back when I was working in radio covering the team, not working for the Bills, and the Bills had been in salary cap jail in 2001 when they went 3-13. Then they started signing a couple of guys in 2002, like London Fletcher, a couple other guys. But then in 2003, the GM at the time, Tom Donahoe, completely swung for the fences because they had already made the Drew Bledsoe trade the year before, and now they were trying to build up the defense. And they signed Takeo Spikes to an offer sheet. He was a transition free agent. He got the transition tag from the Bengals. But the interesting thing was the last game of the previous regular season here in Buffalo was Bills-Bengals. And Bills fans knew that Takeo Spikes was going to be a free agent in the offseason. There were literally signs in the stadium saying, "Come to Buffalo, Takeo." I mean, this is in 2002. Like, this is before the dawn of social media, anything like that. And the Bills fans were literally recruiting him for the team in the last regular season game. And so they signed him to an offer sheet, and the Bengals had 7 days to match, 5 business days, 7 full days to match the offer. And so I just remember the tension in Buffalo as to whether Cincinnati was going to match the offer. And Bills fans were like on pins and needles until it eventually came out, oh, it doesn't look like the Bengals are going to match and whatever. And then Takeo comes, they have the big press conference, and he admits that the Bills fans recruiting him, shouting at him as he's walking up the tunnel, "Hey, come to Buffalo next year, sign with the Bills, blah, blah, blah." He admitted in the press conference it had an impact on his decision-making. And after that, I mean, Bills fans loved him. It was like it was over right there.
Right.
Like he admitted that they had an impact on him signing, and they loved him after that ever since.
There you go.
I was wondering if the Bills were to get J.J. Watt, if he was going to shout out Bills Mafia for all the recruiting that happened on social media the last couple weeks and all the cryptic tweets that J.J. Watt was sending out, and Bills fans would be like, "Oh, Buffalo is spelled with this many characters. His tweet is this many characters.
my
it
God,
equals up. He's coming to the Bills."
That was
Like,
crazy.
Bills
Crazy.
Mafia never rests on that stuff. But I wanted to go around and do a top 3 needs for the Bills and 1 want. So I know Brandon Beane loves to use free agency for his needs so that he can draft for his wants. So as we head into the off season and free agency is upon us and the NFL draft is right around the corner, I want to get all of your top 3 needs that you think the Buffalo Bills have and 1 want for this upcoming season. Now, I mean, we know they got into the playoffs, won a couple games, didn't necessarily make it to the Super Bowl, of course, because they lost in the AFC Championship game, a tough game against the Chiefs there, but we all hope they're going to be back there the next season. And that game definitely opened up some things that you can look back on and think, okay, this needs to be addressed for this next upcoming season if you want to be back in this game and you want a chance to win. So let's go around. We'll each do 1. And if we have, I'm sure we're going to have the same ones because it's not like this team has a bunch of things that need to happen in the offseason to get better. It's tiny things here and there. So if you have the same one, you can just piggyback off of whoever has the similar one and add on to their point or bring up something different. So Tasker, I'll start with you. What's 1 need?
I think the offensive line needs to be bolstered. They've got 4 guys or maybe 5 guys from the 8 that they had on game day that are not going to be here, or at least are not under contract. That's first and foremost is the most glaring thing they need to do. They've got this quarterback who has proven that he is the goose that laid the golden egg, so to speak. They've got to protect him, and they've got to give him every chance and every support mechanism they can to be successful. This thing's going to live and die with how Josh plays. So you've got to support him in every way you can. And with that many good offensive linemen whose contracts have run out, that is first and foremost that is the only concern I have for this offseason. You can make a case for maybe a second corner, maybe a replacement for Trent Murphy. But for me, or Matt Milano, a replacement. I think it begins and ends with the offensive line.
Did anybody have that on their list too? I mean, the Bills have more than a few offensive linemen that are free agents this year. So it'll be interesting to see how many of those guys re-sign with the Bills. The number, is 4 or 5? I don't think they can re-sign all of those guys. I do expect some of them to be back on the Bills this year, whether it's 1 or 2. I guess we'll find out in a couple weeks. But Chris, Eric, did you have offensive line on your list of needs? If not,
I'll let the old lineman take it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you know a lot more about this, so you'll be able to expand on everything I say. But I absolutely think that the offensive line needs to be addressed. When you look at how many free agents this is a absolute need. They need to bolster this group if people are going to walk. Darrell Williams played really well. It'll be interesting to see how much money he's going to be able to get. John Feliciano, he loves Buffalo. Buffalo loves him. It would make sense that they would get him back, but he's now approaching free agency. He's going to figure out what he's worth on the open market, and then the Bills got to go pay that. And so you have some interesting stuff going on with the offensive line. I think when you look at the Bills for 2021, Sean McDermott talked about it very early in that press conference. They need to get better in the run game. When you spend a 3rd-round draft pick the last 2 years on running backs, it's probably not coming from the running back position, bolstering that room. So it's going to come from the offensive line, maybe some play calling, whatever it may be. But the offensive line is going to have to assist in the run game as well. And I'll use that to say another need for this group would be a tight end who also could help with the run game, but provide a second option to Dawson Knox. Dawson's great in the passing game, but if you're going to establish a run game, you need to be able to have a tight end that can block. And I think they're looking for a blocking tight end that can also be dynamic in the pass game. And there's a few of those guys available out there or could become available. You think about a guy like maybe Zach Ertz, and that's kind of a dream scenario. But when you look around, and this is a topic that we'll probably get to as well, but when you look around, there's going to be a lot of cap casualties. So you can't just look at the free agent list right now. There's going to be a ton of cap casualties that come once this salary cap is officially established and we see what the number is. So there's going to be so many players that come and flood this market and there's going to be some positions that will just simply kind of price each other out to where there's going to be some good deals out there. And in the past, people would say, well, yeah, there's going to be good deals for X franchise, the Patriots, whoever it may be. Well, the Bills are that desirable destination now. So there may be some great deals out there for the Buffalo Bills based upon what their trajectory is and their projected win totals for next year.
Yeah.
Chris, what about you? Did you have run game or offensive line on there?
Yeah, it's offensive line. I mean, it's the top one. And, as Steve said, you got to protect your number one asset right now, which was the driving force behind the team's success, and that's Josh Allen. So you have to protect him, number one. And then to Eric's point, you got to improve the run game by making it a more effective group. And as Brandon Beane said himself, he has no problem with Zach Moss or Devin Singletary. So that leaves it to improving the schematics and maybe the 5-man group that you have up front, whether you feel you can upgrade it or make it better. I do think Darrell Williams, though, is priority number one in terms of the guys that you want to bring back or return to the fold. I mean, that guy solidified the right tackle position last year. He probably had the best season of the free agents that are up on the Bills' offensive line. So I would make him priority number one to bring back. I know Feliciano is the emotional juice that kind of fires that line up. So he's a close second, but the position importance, I think puts Williams at the top of the list. You need a guy that you know can capably step in and give you 16 games at right tackle that you're not going to have to worry about no matter the matchup. And the game alone that he had against T.J. Watt in the Sunday night game against Pittsburgh convinces me that that should be your guy that you put back there at right tackle. Everybody else is gravy if you can make it work with your cap situation. And I agree with Eric. It's going to be a buyer's market in the free agent once free agency gets rolling and the cap numbers known and the cap casualties start spilling tons of talent out into the market, perhaps like we haven't seen in a long time. So there should be bargain values there for teams like the Bills who can't break the bank to try to refurbish this line.
Yeah, and Maddy, you compared free agency to almost like NBA nowadays, and it's going to look like, in my opinion, like the NBA for the next couple of years, because you're going to have so many veterans sign one-year prove-it deals that there's going to be a ton of movement this year. And because of the one-year prove-it deals, assuming that if COVID regulations are off next year, the league revenue goes back to how it is, and we get on that steep upward trajectory with this big TV deal that's rumored to be out there about ready to be signed. When you have all that in play, man, there's gonna be a lot of movement this year and also next year. And that's where, the Bills have done everything right. And then, as far as managing the cap and being fiscally responsible, well, now it's about, can they go recruit some of these one-year prove-it deal guys, because they don't have a ton of room based upon, the projection, but they have a very special team right now and a special quarterback that could attract some of those guys here.
Yeah, to that point, I was going to say this is a year where players are also expecting to probably get a little less if they're free agents, knowing that that cap number isn't what people thought it was going to be before COVID. So then as a player, are you thinking, okay, I might have to take a little bit less, but would I rather take a little bit less and go to a team who's not necessarily going to be a playoff contender? Or do I want to go to a team and take a little bit less that can be a Super Bowl contender? And I think the Bills have that type of attraction that other teams may not have. And you're coming to this team, and this team can make it to the Super Bowl next year if they fix those pieces and if players stay healthy. That has got to be something on a lot of people, on a lot of players' radars. So many people, every player wants to make it to the Super Bowl and have a chance at playing on the biggest stage ever. So it'll be interesting in that regard as well. Run game was on my list. It was number 2. I mean, I agree with everything you guys said. And to that point, adding on, I mean, the Bills ranked 20th for their run. 107.7 rushing yards per game is what they averaged. No running back had a 100-yard game this year. The closest they got was Zach Moss, and Devin Singletary had just over 80 rushing yards in one game this season. So the running backs, like you guys said, I don't think it's on them. I think it's on the run blocking. This offensive line did such a great job pass blocking, but when it came to run blocking, that was where their struggle was. And you look at a guy like Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, who are younger players, I think are still learning. Of course, Zach Moss being a rookie running back, still learning what it's like to be in the NFL, learning a playbook and whatnot. You can't put all of that on the running backs as they're in their first and second year in the NFL. Also interesting, Josh Allen had 572 pass attempts this past season. Devin Singletary and Zach Moss combined for 268 carries. So that number is showing you pass versus run, what the Bills did when they were on offense.
And that doesn't scare me that much, because the Bills were so successful on offense this year, and Josh Allen did such a great job with the completion percentage that number doesn't scare me. I just think, I'm looking more at their yards per carry. When they were running the football, I just felt like they weren't nearly as effective this year as they should have been. Now that comes from maybe a lack of carries. It takes continuity. We talked about it many times on One Bills Live on Mondays this year, that maybe the yards per carry was down because of that. I want to present another need for the Buffalo Bills as well. And heading into the Super Bowl, I kind of had this feeling where the Kansas City Chiefs, the Bills, the way they played the Chiefs twice this year, they kind of lost both ways. The first time they got the ball ran down their throat, second time they threw all over them. And it was kind of like, okay, this is the team that the Bills need to go address needs to go try and beat. It reminded me when everyone in the AFC was chasing the Patriots, and you kind of had to do different things defensively because Gronk and Hernandez were so good that you either had to get more athletic at linebacker or bigger at safety, one or the other, because you had to combat them. So I was thinking to myself, like, okay, what do you need to do to then go beat Kansas City? And it's, if you're gonna slow down that offense, you need 3 corners that could run so you can play some man defense and not just get smoked, so you can apply some pressure. Well, then I watched the Super Bowl, and Todd Bowles, who brings a ton of pressure, sits back in a bunch of cover 2 man and says, look, our corners may not be as good as your receivers, but they all have help over the top with 2 safeties. And the guys, the 6 guys in the box held up. They shut down the screens. They shut down the run. They shut down the scrambles. They were pass rushing. So with the Bills, I think you either need to upgrade the cornerback position tremendously at the 2 and maybe 3 spot. Like I like Leonard Johnson as a nickel a lot, especially in that big nickel role, but maybe someone else that can run that you could put in the slot that's maybe a little quicker, or you got to get better in the front 6. And with Matt Milano maybe moving on, I think you got to get it better. You probably got to get bigger at D tackle at one spot, bring in a true run stuffer that can be in there on downs, on running down, so that you can defend the run with 6 guys in the box at that point. And then you got to have guys that can show up on a consistent basis and rush the passer. And for me this year, besides Jerry Hughes and at times other guys would flash, but it's time for Ed Oliver to show up and start making an impact. And I know Brandon Beane at the end of the year bragged on him a little bit and said he did stuff that didn't necessarily show up in the stat book, but I'm ready for the stat book to then show up this year. And then, take Jerry Hughes, and then what are you building around those guys because you got your leader of the defense and Jerry Hughes as well, your veteran leader. Where are you getting guys in that front 6 where, okay, if we don't have the money to address the cornerback positions to truly be able to do to pressure the Chiefs, well, now we got to be able to stop them with our front 6. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah,
we've talked about that a lot.
We talk about it a lot. The fewer guys it takes you to get quick pressure and consistent pressure, the better you're going to be. And in the Super Bowl, the Tampa Bay got good pressure with the 4 guys up front.
Yeah, and also, by the way, they have the 2 most athletic linebackers in the league. I mean, in Devin White and Levante David. I mean, those guys are what allow you to play the way Tampa played, because they can play with the front 6, and those 2 guys can cover so much ground.
Right.
They can just stop everything at the second level.
Yeah, Tampa Bay did such a good job of dropping into coverage and getting good, consistent pressure. And Pat Mahomes set a record for how much he had to scramble, and they didn't rush 5 guys all that often. They rushed 4, and if you can do that and close off the windows and shrink those windows with extra guys dropping into coverage, and I'll say this too, and not for nothing, in Kansas City specific, Tyreek Hill can outrun anybody in the National Football League, no question about it. But he doesn't out-route them. He just outruns them. And once you put a lid on it, he's not going to run a complex, stop comeback. He's going to take the lid off the defense, and if you lose him, or he's going to catch a quick route and he's going to take off. The intermediate routes aren't there for him, and once they put a guy over the top of him, everybody else is fair game on that Kansas City defense. And then, of course, Travis Kelce, who had a really nice game, but he didn't win it. So their ability to cover with 7 guys consistently and get good, consistent, on time. They didn't get have guys running free, and Mahomes wasn't like that. But when he dropped back and wanted to look and there was no window there, he had to run. The pocket was done, and he was scrambling for his life because somebody was winning on time, and usually it was one of 4 guys. That was the key for me, and I think that's what the Bills, Sean McDermott, I think that's his holy grail. If he can have 4 rushers, and that's it, and everybody else drops into coverage and closes the windows down, that's a winning formula.
That's what makes what the Bills are going to do on the defensive side of the ball in the offseason so compelling, because I think we all know they don't have the money to address all 3 levels of their defense. But you can make an argument for all 3 levels of their defense, whether you're losing Matt Milano, so you have to replace there to have 2 athletic linebackers, somebody that you feel confident putting on the field with Tremaine Edmonds every single down, or do you completely reshuffle the deck up front where you already have 6 of the top 11 salaries on your roster on your defensive line? Who are you subtracting to add somebody that you think's better so you can get back to your core philosophy that Steve's talking about of getting consistent pressure with only 4? They could not do that last year. So what do you do there? Or, as Eric said, do you finally invest in youth in a proven player that you can plug and play that might be a high draft choice at that second corner spot. They've been plugging it with a veteran on a one-year deal each of the last 2 or 3 years, and it's worked with marginal success because an undrafted rookie in Levi Wallace has beaten them all out for the starting job. So do you just say screw it and use a high draft choice to just plug somebody in there and say, this guy's our second-round pick, and he's going to line up opposite Tre'Davious on day one, and off we go? You could make an argument for all 3 levels of the defense. The question is, which one are they going to address in this salary cap strapped year?
Yeah, and Brandon Beane said going into this offseason, he used words of, this isn't going to be a big free agency for us. Don't expect any star-studded names. Of course, they were going to show interest in J.J. Watt, or at least see what he is willing to take for his new deal and his new team, which obviously isn't the Buffalo Bills, but they're going to go after, to a degree, some of those bigger names just to see what they're talking about or how much they want. But yeah, Brandon Beane said it's not going to be a big free agency this year. So it'll be really interesting to see how they fill those needs, to see who they let go of, to see who they re-sign, because I completely agree. They could add in any of those areas on defense. And we've heard Leslie Frazier, this will now be his 3rd season, or at least since I've gotten to the Buffalo Bills, the 3rd season where he's been saying we need to get pressure with just 4. We need to win with just 4. They go in last year with a new defensive line coach and a new philosophy of we're going to rotate the heck out of these defensive linemen and try and confuse the offensive line with how many players are rotating through the defensive line. And that did not work. And Chris, you and I have talked about it the last time I was on One Bills Live, how that philosophy got changed about halfway through the season, and then they started playing closer to the same 4 guys, and you still weren't getting that type of pressure that they wanted. And so towards the end of the season, we saw them mix it up by sending some corners, sending some safeties on blitzes to help with that. But yeah, I think you need a pass rusher. You need somebody who can help Jerry Hughes, who can take on double teams so Jerry Hughes can work, or Jerry Hughes can take on some of those double teams so your other guy can work. But I don't think you find that in the draft at number 30. You don't find a pass rusher who can make a difference immediately. I mean, we drafted AJ Epinesa and we saw that slow, gradual build in his rookie season where he was being used more towards the end of the season. But I think he's still a work in progress and isn't going to come and flash in week 1 next season and be a premier player on this defensive line. So I think that's why you have to get a pass rusher or somebody who can help out on multiple downs in free agency. What else do you guys have on your list?
Yeah, I mean, that runs it. This is a team that's got a lot, I mean, in place. Their skill positions on offense, even if John Brown needs to be restructured or if he's not there, this is a group that they can go with. All the skill players, the running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, receivers. I don't have a problem with any of it. They're fine to go. Their secondaries, to me, Chris and I got to agree with him. We're high on Dane Jackson, his ability to come in and play. He plays very well. He's aggressive, and he's got all the intangibles that you want. The only box he doesn't check is the physical size box. But man, oh man, the guy plays. He competes hard, and he shows up. He's going to be a part of the mix this coming year, I think. Yeah. Everybody else is great, I think, offensively, except for the guys whose contracts are up on the offensive line. Defensively, I think it's a question of where the coaches evaluate all the defensive linemen. Mario Addison, Quentin Jefferson, Vernon Butler, Starlo Tulele, Harrison Phillips, Ed Oliver, and then of course AJ Epinesa. They got to replace Trent Murphy in the starting lineup and in that rotation. I wouldn't be surprised if the coaching staff is ready to say we can go with these guys. We like them. We think they're going to play better this next year. We think they weren't as productive this year because of this, and that's all going away because they're going to be better this year. We don't know how they're going to evaluate these guys, what they see in their film on game day. So they may like this defensive front a lot more going forward than fans would give them credit for. If they don't, we're going to see that in the next couple of weeks with restructuring, with guys will get released. They'll make changes because they've got to going forward to get under the cap and to sign guys to replace them.
And what about one want? If we've covered all the needs, Eric, do you have another need you wanted to address?
No, I was just going to say, it's interesting when you mentioned Star Lotulelei, and it's going to be interesting next year to see what the effect is for the guys that took a full year off of football.
Yeah.
Yes, their body will probably be a little bit fresher, but he is another year older. Are we going to put all of our eggs into that basket and say, that's our run stuffer? If we can only keep 6 guys in the box and kind of mimic this Tampa Bay model, is he our run stuffer in there, or do we need to upgrade at that position? And it's crazy because you got no evaluation on him from this year, and it would have been his second year in the defense. You would assumed his second year in this system, playing with these guys, he would have made a jump, but then he sits out this season. So it's interesting. It'll be an interesting evaluation from that standpoint on him. And there's other teams with more opt-outs than just one, but he's our one, and he was one of our highest paid guys the previous season, our biggest free agent signing money wise. So that'll be interesting. But I'll take it to a want. And another position that the Bills have to address is backup quarterback. I love Matt Barkley, so I want either him back, and if it's not him, I want Ryan Fitzpatrick. But
I'm totally with you.
That's just because he's my boy. It's going to be interesting, though. I think he's going to get another chance to start somewhere this year, which if he goes to a new team would be team number 10 that he'll likely throw a touchdown for and just further solidify his spot in Canton. Maybe not with a bust, but a record.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my only want is I want a second cornerback and draft it early, like first or second round. Just get the kid that you can put right in the lineup, just like you did with Trey White. You've been doing this 1 year merry-go-round with veterans on the other side. Trey White is your veteran corner now. He's entering year 5. He's your vet. Draft a young kid right at the top of the draft somewhere where you can plug and play. And I understand the Matt Milano thing and him probably not being back could compromise that. But even if you take a playmaking linebacker at pick 30, and there's going to be good ones down there, and you can plug and play him, I still think you can get a corner in round 2. And I know Steve's going to yell at me because he wants the big guys up front on both lines early in the draft. But I just want the second cornerback position to be rectified, settled, done deal, Lucille. That's a want for me more than a need, I guess.
Yeah. For me, I think I've seen the Bills do this, and we've talked about it at length on the show. They brought in Jordan Phillips, Star Lotulelei, signed in free agency. They drafted Ed Oliver and A.J. Epinesa. They brought in Trent Murphy, Butler, Addison, Jefferson. They've drafted high. They've spent in free agency, and they still, they don't have
a front four that can get to the quarterback by themselves.
Right, a front four that can get to the quarterback by themselves. So I would like them to see if they can fix that. I don't know.
Shuffle the deck.
Yeah. I trust them. If they evaluate these guys and say, no, you know what, we're good with these guys, okay, I'll live with it. But I would love to see them do that up front. Get some big – I like heavy bodies down inside, and I'd like to see that.
I like those names and things that the Bills want or you guys want heading into free agency or the draft. I think my want is tight end. I think that's also can double as a need. They got to figure that out. They've got to figure out one more person that can help with Dawson Knox. The tight ends totaled 407 yards between Dawson Knox and Tyler Kroft last season. Probably not what you want out of, a league that we're seeing more tight ends have success. Look at Travis Kelce. I know George Kittle got hurt, but look at what he can do. I think those are teams that maybe you try and model what your tight ends can do after tight ends who are really great at blocking, but also really great in helping out in the receiving game. So I'd like to see Dawson Knox have a splash season next year, or I'd like to see another guy who can really help share the load with that tight end group when it comes to blocking and catching passes. But before we wrap up, because we've spent a lot of time talking already, so we'll be quick on this one. What's one player that the Bills must re-sign and why? Eric, I'll start with you. Who's on your list for one player the Bills got to re-sign and why?
I'll say John Feliciano. You got a young offense, and he's a guy that sets the tone up front. And I know we said tackle is a big issue. Maybe you can address tackle at pick number 30 if you can't re-sign Darrell Williams. But I'll go with John Feliciano just because he's such a tone setter, such a culture guy up there. And for a young offense, you can tell when he's in and out of the lineup.
What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I get the Feliciano thing, and odds are he's probably the easier one to re-sign because he won't come at quite the price tag. But I think you just got to move heaven and earth to try to get Darrell Williams back in the fold. I just think 2 veteran tackles to protect Josh is huge. He's a big body, too. I don't think I would point to him when assessing the problems that the run game had in terms of its effectiveness because that guy can road grade. He's big enough to do it. So I'm sticking with Darrell Williams.
Yeah, and it might be a toss-up for me between them. I kind of like Feliciano as well, but I think Darrell Williams plays the more important position. I think Brownie's right. This last year, the only thing you could depend on was the 2 tackles on their offensive line, Deion Dawkins and Darrell Williams. Mitch Morse was in and out of the lineup. He had a concussion that pulled him out of a game early. John Feliciano wasn't around for the first 5, 6, 8 games of the season, and Cody Ford left early in the season with an injury after 5 or 6 games. So they never had the guards and the center that they thought they were going to have at any point during the season. And when Cody Ford went out for good, it fell to Ike Butker, who came in and played that left guard spot. So, yeah, I think Darrell Williams plays the position that I like, but I get what Eric's saying as well. There's no question. When John Feliciano was on the field for the Bills' offensive line, they were better. All 5 spots were better, not just the right guard. And there's something to be said for guys like that on your team, and I think John Feliciano is that guy for the Bills' offensive line.
Yeah, I'd love to see John Feliciano be a part of this Buffalo Bills team next year and the years to come. I think he just adds so much to the locker room. I think he has that oomph to the team and to the locker room. I mean, when he was down and out and when he came back in for the Bills after he was healthy, so many players were saying, this is our guy. This is the guy who brings the juice. He's a savage. This is what we need on our team. This is what we needed on the offensive line. So I like the camaraderie that he brings. And Brandon Beane was on a PFF podcast with Chris Collinsworth and Richard Sherman a couple weeks ago. And he brought up a story when he was with the Panthers and they let some guys walk in free agency who were more locker room guys, and talked about how that had an effect on the locker room as a whole. And some players on the team were not happy that some important guys in the locker room walked. And so I think that's an important guy in the locker room. I don't think our guys would be happy if they let John Feliciano walk. I think he's that important to our team. So that's why I'm saying John Feliciano, plus he can play wherever the hell you put him. He could also play on defense. I think that guy is just such a crazy hard-nosed player that he could have success anywhere. But guys, thank you so much for being on Bills Pod Squad. We appreciate the time. We appreciate the insight that you guys bring, helping me set the table for free agency as it begins on March 17th. A lot of good stuff, a lot of things to look forward to see what the Bills do during free agency, and to see if they address all the points that we talked about. Not too many. There's just a couple things that need to be tweaked, fixed, and we know Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, they're the gurus on this stuff. So they know what's best for the team. They know what players are going to be best for the team. They know what guys are best to re-sign. So I'm excited. It's been nice to have a couple weeks of not that much info breaking, at least on Buffalo's side, but I'm also ready to get busy again. So appreciate the time, fellas.
Thanks, Maddy.
Good stuff, Maddy.
Good stuff.
Enjoy.
Thank you all for joining in on this week's episode of Bills Pod Squad presented by the New York Lottery. Thanks for helping me lay out what free agency is going to look like. Things could get interesting in the next couple of weeks, but we'll be back next week, so stay tuned for another episode of Bills Pod Squad.